I will be the host today. My name is Marcus Lobb. I'm the Provincial Manager of Farm to School BC. I've been with the organization for coming on 6 years, and I was actually a community animator before moving into this role. So I've been doing this work in and around school gardens and urban agriculture for coming up on almost 15 years now, which seems amazing. I would like to acknowledge that I am presenting today from the traditional ancestral territory of the Lekwungen peoples, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt Nation. The Lekwungen people have hunted and gathered here for thousands of years. This area, with its temperate climate, natural harbors, and rich resources, was a trading center for a diversity of First Nations peoples. When Captain James Douglas anchored off of Clover Point in 1842, he saw the result of the Lekwungen people's careful land management, such as controlled burning and food cultivation. These practices were part of the land and part of the Lekwungen culture. The development of a modern city makes it more difficult to experience the landscape that is home to the Lekwungen. However, footprints of traditional land use are all around us, and this land is inseparable from the lives, customs, art, and culture of those who have lived here since the beginning. So a little bit about Farm to School BC. We are a program that brings healthy, local, and sustainable food into schools across British Columbia and provides students with hands-on learning opportunities to develop food literacy, all while strengthening the local food system and enhancing school and community connectedness. We empower students and school communities to make informed food choices while contributing to vibrant, sustainable regional food systems that support the health of people, community, and environment. Farm to school activities differ by school district, or region, but always look to include the following three elements: healthy local food, school and community connectedness, and hands-on learning. We are a provincial organization that is administered by the Public Health Association of BC, and we have hubs that are located, as you see in these little beats, across the province. Each of those hubs obviously have school districts that are within those regions, and we have animators on our staff that support those school districts. And so as you see across here, these are the different regions and some of the other members of our staff. So one of our hubs right now, we will be filling in with a new animator come in the fall. So we actually have 8 hubs, and Matthew, who will be speaking today, has been a Capital Regional animator over the past year. We also work closely with local health authorities through health region leads. Health region leads are the main contacts between local health authorities and Farm to School BC. In most cases, health region leads are public health dietitians. And here are the following health leads that we work really closely with. So the agenda for today, before we get going, we thought it might be useful for everyone on the call to potentially edit their name to indicate which school district they are supporting. So for example, for me, I'm in the Souk School District, so I would maybe change my name to be Marcus, and then in brackets, Souk School District. We think it could be a great way to help make connections between people who are on the call, and just to see also for us as the presenters, who are some of the different people that are joining us kind of in real time. So if you wanted to take a moment to do that, to just go and change your name, that would be great. The agenda for today, we'll have Sam Gambling from the BC chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, who will speak for a few moments about both provincial and national scope. Matthew Kemshaw from Farm to School BC and Nourish. And we will do some polls that will gather information for potential future support that Farm to School BC can offer, potentially in this kind of format. And we will also have a question and answer period. So this will come at the end, and we've left a good amount of time for the question and answer period because we assume that many of you have questions that you'd like to ask. So that's how we will work through it. So before we get started, I also wanted to say Happy Pride Month. Diversity sort of intertwines in our work in many ways when we think about communities we work in, diversity of the actual land and species that exist on it. So it's just something that Farm to School BC feels strongly about, and we wanted to acknowledge that. So our first presenter today is Sam Gambling. So Sam is the provincial lead of the BC chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, which is administered by the Public Health Association of BC. And so Sam actually was once an animator within our staff in the Vancouver region a handful of years ago. And she's joining us today to talk about the work of the coalition on a national scale and a provincial. And then following, as I mentioned earlier, Matthew will then speak after Sam, and we will continue on with questions at the end. So I will pass the mic over to Sam.
Great. Thanks, Marcus. So hi, everybody. Nice to see some familiar names and faces on the call. My name is Sam Gambling. I coordinate the BC chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food alongside my colleague, Sue Ann Banks, who's the Indigenous lead for the BC chapter, and she's also on the call here today. So the Coalition for Healthy School Food is the largest school food network in Canada, made up of over 260 nonprofit member organizations, ranging from really small community-based organizations that operate breakfast, lunch, or snack programs, to kind of provincial and national health, education, and Indigenous organizations. 57 of our coalition members are based here in BC from all corners of the province. And PHABC, who hosts the BC chapter of the coalition and administers Farm to School BC, is just one member alongside many others that you may be familiar with and are also joining us on the call today, like Shoe Swap Food Action, Food for Thought, Seashell Community School Society, Kamloops Food Policy Council, and many more. In addition to our members, the coalition has been endorsed by over 120 organizations, including school boards, municipalities, and others, and we stay connected with thousands of passionate and experienced practitioners and supporters from coast to coast to coast. Together, the coalition members, endorsers, and supporters are collectively advocating for public investment in a Canada-wide universal healthy school food program that would ensure all K-12 students across the country have access to healthy food at school every day. Next slide, please, Marcus. So Canada is the only G7 nation without a federally funded or supported school food program. And in UNICEF's 2017 report card, we ranked 37th out of 41 high-income countries around providing access to nutritious food to children. Studies show that across the country, children and youth are consuming insufficient and unhealthy diets with low fruit and vegetable consumption. And we all know there's an unprecedented disconnection to our food systems. So this current combination of food insecurity and low food literacy rates has obvious negative impacts on a child's physical and mental health, as well as their academic performance with long-term public health implications. Next slide. But there's lots of evidence that points to the value of universal school food programs, both to improve poor nutrition and to encourage positive health and education outcomes in children from all socioeconomic backgrounds. For example, school food programs have been linked with reductions in behavioral and emotional problems, reductions in bullying, aggression, anxiety, and depression, as well as fewer visits to the school nurse. And in addition, school food programs have been shown to improve critical food literacy skills that support local agriculture and promote sustainable food systems. And combined with broader poverty reduction strategies at provincial and national levels, school food programs can also alleviate the burden of food insecurity felt by women and families, and can be designed intentionally to level the playing field and reduce inequalities. Next slide. So in 2014, organizations across Canada started coming together as a coalition to advocate for public investment in school food. But we don't want just any old school food program. We want a high quality program. We're looking to other countries to learn best practices, promising practices, and maybe what not to do in designing a high quality food program, school food program for Canada. So we're advocating for a program that meets these guiding principles based on best practices identified both by researchers and by practitioners in Canada and around the world. And in particular, we want to see a program that is health promoting, which means it's both about being what food is being served. So it's referring to both serving nutritious food, but also fostering healthy school food environments. So how food is being served and engaged with. Universal, in other words, we're talking about universal accessibility, ensuring that all students in a school can access the program in a non-stigmatizing manner. Cost shared between federal and provincial governments, as well as ensuring there's some local support for programs. Respectful and flexible to local conditions, supporting a variety of program models that meet the need of school communities. So this isn't a top-down program that looks the same across the country, but it really reflects the needs of local school communities. Connected to communities, supporting local food producers and economies through local and seasonal food procurement. Comprehensive, providing hands-on food systems education that's integrated to the curriculum and will foster food literacy. Guided by national principles to ensure conflict of interest safeguards, such as restricting marketing to students. and committed to Indigenous control over school food programs for Indigenous students. So these guiding principles align with the pillars and priorities of Farm to School. So you may see some overlap in terms of terminology throughout this presentation. And I think these guiding principles really define who the coalition is. These are key characteristics of a robust and successful school food program that centers students, promotes health and equity within a school community. And Matthew will be speaking more to various principles as he presents his work. So this is an exciting time to put these principles into action and explore how we can expand or enrich existing programs across BC. As hopefully all of you know on the call, the 2023 BC budget committed $214 million over the next 3 years to support school food programs. And we have heard from the Ministry of Education that this new Feeding Futures program will extend beyond the 3 years. So this is intended to be a new long-term social investment in BC's education system. And this BC funding commitment is the single largest investment in school food in Canadian history. So BC is really leading the way in supporting the health and education of our students through food programs. That said, we do anticipate other funding commitments in the future, particularly from the federal government, who is in the process of developing a national school food policy and has expressed commitments, at least, to develop a Canada-wide school food program. So the coalition is going to continue putting pressure and working hard over the next year to make sure we see an actual dollar amount in federal budget 2024. And over the coming years, the network of organizations that make up the coalition, including Farm to School and many on the call, will continue to advocate and work hard to support school districts in developing food programs that meet the needs of BC students. So next slide. Yeah, this is my last slide. Just want to invite you to join our movement. This picture is just some of our members and endorsers across BC, including 11 school districts who have endorsed the coalition and our vision for a universal healthy school food program. Your district too can endorse the coalition. So if you're interested in this or other ways in which you can stay engaged or connected with the coalition's network or our work, please feel free to send me an email or sign up for our newsletter on our website, and continue staying in touch with upcoming activities and ways to engage. So yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Sam. It's pretty incredible to see all of that work and sort of progress be condensed into about 8 minutes. Gladly, you'll be staying on later, and we'll be able to have a discussion and lots of questions. So yeah, thank you for that overview of all of the work that, look at all these amazing organizations, many in BC, there that have done such great work over the past bunch of years to get us really to help bring us to where we are with this funding that we're receiving. So thank you, Sam. Okay, so for our second presenter, the way we designed this webinar today was really to initiate and to consider some of the options that are out there. And so we wanted Sam to come and talk about what is the motivation behind these, what are the benefits, and how a school meal program can be designed to really benefit students in these different ways, benefit communities, benefit producers. And Matthew, here in the Capital Region, for the past number of years, has worked on some different projects with community members and developed some pilots in the Sault School District. And he's on our staff. He's been on our staff for the past year, and he's coming to talk a little bit about what they've done on the ground level, what was some of their experience, and what some of the learnings. So I'm happy to have him here and present. And so I will pass it over to Matthew.
Thanks, Marcus. It's really an honor to be here today and have so many people interested in this topic. A bit about myself. I've been working, like Marcus said, as the Capital Region animator for Farm to School BC for the last year, and have been involved in sort of school food programming for about 20 years now in different capacities. I've done a lot of school gardening, and this picture of me is from the Edward Milne Community School Garden, where I work part-time as a garden coordinator in the Sault School District. I worked as a garden coordinator for the past 3.5 years in that district, and for a longer period of time worked with a number of different organizations to coordinate this kind of a ragtag group of organizations and health authority representatives who are interested in supporting healthy food environments in schools. And last school year, we received a little bit of support to look at developing a small pilot to support the Souk School District with some innovative school food service. And at the beginning of this school year, with family affordability funds, we've been working with the Souk School District to sort of design a school food program and service that could meet the needs of schools and students this year, but be able to try to grow something a little bit more sustainable that might be able to grow to serve the wider needs for school food service in Souk. And our goal is across this region that I live in here on southern Vancouver Island, and in the same region as Marcus. I'm on the Lekwungen territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt Nation myself. And I wanted to share with you today, we can go to the next slide, Marcus, a little bit of the design thinking that helped develop this Setting the Table pilot program. This sort of present a case study to you about how we've thought about developing our school food program this year. We've developed this project with a big team, and I'll talk a little bit about it, but we've sort of followed this ADDIE educational design framework. It's you can see like a sort of stepped process, and I want to talk a bit about each step in the process and some of the considerations that we made as we went forward with designing our Setting the Table pilot program in the Souk School District this year. So let's start with analysis. Well, the next slide, Marcus. The first piece that we did was to really try to understand both the local food landscape and the school food landscape in our region. And this analysis work was happening for quite a long time. As I mentioned, I was a part of this group of organizations that was trying to understand how we could help support healthy food environments in schools. And we actually led quite a detailed study in the summer of 2021. This study was published where I went around and talked to 27 sort of school food champions across our region. Marcus and I had some meetings back then with some of the catering companies and the main kind of charitable food organizations that were interested in supporting school food. And we really tried to wrap our heads around both the commercial food sector and the charitable food sector. And I think this is an important distinction for people to understand, that there is, obviously we know the commercial food sector really well, and as individuals I think this is what we most commonly engage with. We have our producers, the people who are producing food like farmers, our suppliers who are supplying food, folks like grocers, and then there are the processors, the people who are sort of making food like chefs. But there's also this whole charitable food sector which has a lot of really valuable insights, and every region will have different players that are involved in their charitable food sector, and it's important to understand, I think, the local goals, who's working in the scene, who's trying to support food resources getting out to those most in need. What kind of organizational capacity exists? Are there infrastructural capacities? Are there human resource capacities that may be supportive of the development of a school food program? What kind of infrastructure is out there? And then obviously for a school food program, the school food landscape is essential. And so we tried to understand what sorts of infrastructure existed in our schools, what were the space possibilities and constraints, what kind of cultural practices did schools have around food, what is mealtime like in schools, how is it sort of administrated, how is it run, what are the systems to support eating in schools, and what are the HR capacities within schools to support food work. So we really did a lot of trying to understand what's going on in our region before we got started. That was the analysis that we did. And the next thing we went to, we'll go to the next slide here. I guess a bonus, we built a team, and I'll talk a bit more about that had decades of experience. So we were able to gather this information, I would say, like with some level of efficiency, because we had kind of played around in schools for a long time. So our next slide is going to talk about design. So once we had gathered some of that information, we started to sit down as a group and design, like, how can we do this? And the first thing we wanted to figure out is, where can we do this? Where can we cook and distribute food from? We needed a space to aggregate, process, and distribute food from. And we landed on this great food security distribution center that the Mustard Seed owns. It's a big warehouse with a commercial kitchen and lots of a cold storage space. They actually get 8,000 to 12,000 pounds of rescued food through the doors of this building every single day. That's food that 5 years ago would have been going to waste. So we've been able to tap into some of that rescued food stream, which has been really fantastic. We found a space, and the other thing we needed to do to start our design process was to build a team. So we'll go to the next slide, Marcus. building a team was an essential part of our design process. So once we knew kind of what our space or our spaces, we've had this big one space, but you could also design a program with multiple spaces, right? We needed a good team to help us figure out how to do this thing. And we built a team with these kind of key people on board. So chefs and other people who really knew food. I was so thankful and wouldn't have been able to do what we've done without having a couple of really knowledgeable, experienced chefs, people who know how to feed a lot of people quickly and efficiently. We also have educators on our team who are helping us do the development and design work, people who really know schools, who are living it every day, and administrators as well as educators who have some food experience are the people who we put on our team. We also have some folks who are in sort of executive director roles who really know food systems and have spent decades trying to wrap their heads around how to cultivate more local food systems. So in terms of building a farm to school approach, you want those people who know what your local food system kind of is and what assets it has. And the other folks who have been essential to our team have been dietitians and other people who really know what nourishing food is and how to serve food and make food in really good ways. So we built this team, we found a space, it was a part of our design, and then we went in towards sort of a development phase and trying to really piece together exactly what this is going to look like. And so with the development, we really looking at logistics and planning and building systems to produce, distribute, and serve food. And we, at the early days, we've had our space figured out, and we talked a lot around the pros and cons of individually packaged meals versus buffet style meal service. Individually packaged meals for us were a huge amount of garbage and waste. And also from a chef perspective, which we had a lot of on our team, a real waste of time. Having to individually package everything was going to really increase our human resource costs, our chef costs in the kitchen. And we felt that we could make better food by doing it more of a buffet style service. But this did present challenges at the school end. That meant that schools had to then be serving food from a buffet style service onto plates that students would eat from, or bowls. And so we had to work through some sort of systems to figure out how that would work. Once we kind of had an understanding of what kind of like package our food was going to be sent to schools in, we had to design sort of the systems, which included thinking through in a lot of detail all of the equipment needs that we need in the kitchen, in transport from the kitchen to the school, and then in the service of the school. And I think these things are worth considering even if you're cooking within the school. There is still you still have cooking in the kitchen. The food does still need to move from the kitchen to wherever it's being served, even if it's only 20 feet instead of, in our case, can be dozens of kilometers, and then it needs to be served. And so you always have these things that need to be considered. Food safety for us was a really big concern, and I'm going to talk more about some of the details with that, but we learned a lot, and I was grateful to have a fantastic chef with decades of experience who put together a very detailed food safety plan for us. We have a really good food safety and food handling plan with a lot of template forms and things that schools need to be filling out. I'd be happy to share all of this with folks. Then we got into, once we kind of had some of these systems, we were getting into the fun of developing menus and testing things out and developing ideas of what we wanted to do. And then once we had kind of the menus and started cooking food, we got into the fun of sourcing product and establishing relationships with local producers and figuring out how to get all the food we needed in as good a way as we could. And we've really leaned into trying to source a lot of stuff locally with our project. Contingency planning was another thing that happened in the development stage. We were thinking about what happens if there's a traffic accident. We can't get our van out to Souk, where we have 4 schools. There's like one road that goes out there. So we've provided emergency backup, frozen chilies for all of the schools we're serving. Contingency planning, what happens if our head chef gets sick? Who's going to fill in for her? Those kinds of things, like really trying to wrap our heads around what happens if, and what are all the things that could happen. And we spent quite a bit of time planning for that, and then planning for like our staffing needs. How are we going to support this? We've built a program that also uses a lot of volunteers, and so we've been developing volunteer management systems and coordination capacities. We're out building some tools actually that may be of use to others. that we'll have coming online next year. So we've done a lot of work developing all of these different kinds of systems to produce, distribute, and serve food. And once we've done all that development work, the fun part starts where you get to actually implement and try it out. And so I think our reflex maybe is to go towards implementation right away and just find somebody to get food into schools. But if we're trying to take a farm to school approach where we're trying to get healthy local food into schools, we're trying to involve students in hands-on learning opportunities to build school and community connectedness, it's very important to do those other steps first before you get to this fun part of actually serving food in schools. For us, you can see we're serving in hotel pans. We have a hot entree, a salad, and sort of a sweet item that's served at all of our schools. It's been going really well what we're doing, and we're continuing to iterate and evolve it. But we've had a great time serving 200 meals a day in 8 schools in our pilot across the Souk School District this year. And we're in a process now of also getting into detailed evaluation. So the final piece of this ADDIE process is evaluation. And for us, we spent quite a bit of time trying to wrap our heads around what kind of evaluation to do for our program. And we landed on doing more of a what's called like a process evaluation. So, I'm working with Matt Little on trying to develop our evaluation. He's a prof at UVic, and he encouraged us to go with a process evaluation rather than an outcome evaluation. So the process evaluation, if we go back to the last slide, Marcus, you can see kind of the sorts of questions that we're asking with this kind of evaluation. It's more around how is what we're doing supporting our objectives, and what can we do to make changes, what's working, what's not. And we felt this was a much more useful type of evaluation for us because we're in such a learning period and we want to continue to iterate and evolve what we're doing. We want information about how what we're doing is working or isn't. An outcome evaluation would be more looking at like what's the impact that what we're doing is having on those we're trying to serve. So how is it affecting student learning by providing this food? How is it helping students feel more nourished or whatever? Like what is the impact? And we're not doing that right now. We're not we are interested in that, but we can only do so much. And so we've really leaned in the evaluation into more of a process-oriented evaluation. And I've been working with Matt Little at UVic, and we have a Master's of Public Health Practicum student, Ketsia, who's now a part-time staff with Matt, who's finishing up a process evaluation of our pilot. So all of this is the ADDIE design process in a nutshell. We'll go to the next slide, Marcus. And it's a constantly evolving process. You can see the processes of ADDIE: analysis, design, development, implementation, evaluation. You can think of it as this cyclical thing, but really more accurately, next slide, Marcus, it's a process in which you're constantly kind of moving around. And so you can be in multiple places at once with a project. And right now we are very much in both implementation, evaluation, and analysis for next year. So I'm really spending a lot of time in analysis, trying to understand what we're going to be doing next year with the growth of our program. What are the schools need? Meeting with a lot of schools, understanding their needs. Our chef Ali is really still in implementation mode. And then we've got the evaluation team who are doing, wrapping up the evaluation of the pilot. And so the next slide, what it comes to with this process is that you kind of end up feeling a bit like a conductor in the center of it. And for me, at the center of this program, I feel as though I'm now my mind is trying to do all of these things all at once, all the time, which is exciting and also makes it hard for me to sleep sometimes. But it is a really nice, I think, way of framing the process for developing school food programs, and especially for trying to develop programs that center learning and take a farm to school approach. These steps are important. So that's a little bit about our pilot, and I'm going to now kind of shift into digging a bit deeper with many quick thoughts on things to consider when designing a school food program. So when you're kind of looking a bit closer at our food's journey from farm to school, you can kind of think of it as taking 3 steps. There's like the place where we have to get food, acquire food, it's grown, and then we've got to sort of transform it, cook it, and then share it. With a farm to school approach, I think we like to think of it as more of a cyclical journey. This kind of a linear journey of food is an unsustainable way of running a food system, and unfortunately it is sort of the dominant sort of approach these days. A farm to school approach is a bit different. So the next slide, Marcus, we think of of our food system as a cyclical system in which we grow, cook, share, compost, grow. And at the center of a farm to school approach to school food program development is learning, is the student and I think staff experience of the food program in the school. We want to design and develop programs that center learning, that center the student experience. And it's not just about putting food in bellies, it can be much, much more than that. So I'm going to kind of go through a bunch of different aspects from sort of production or farming, food stewardship through to composting here. So we'll go to the next slide. First thing I want to talk about is production, and I really have been troubling the colonial language of this a lot in myself lately and really trying to understand how to decolonize my thinking about food. And one way that's coming up a lot for me as an avid gardener is shifting my mentality around production. It's more about food stewardship, and we have to recognize that if we're going to get healthy food from the land, we also have to be giving back to the land to maintain that reciprocal relationship. And one cool thing that is developing that is supporting that kind of engagement at schools is school farms. So we'll go to the next slide, Marcus. School farms are not school gardens. So school gardens are spaces in which production or food stewardship is not the central element. Most school gardens are more about connecting students with a hands-on lived experience of the natural world, for exploring where food comes from, but not for harvesting large amounts of food. It's got a lot of other really good and valuable goals. School farms are developing to actually produce meaningful amounts of food for school food programs. And there are examples of some really exciting school farms developing. There's a few new examples in both Nanaimo and Squamish, which my colleagues at Farm to School BC have shared some really great information with me about, but there's really great information that you can get about these new farms that are developing. And indeed, Farm to School BC has actually created a school farm guide, which is available on our website, which outlines some steps for consideration in the development of school farms. School farms can be a legitimate way to produce food for school meal programs, and they can obviously create centers for a lot more learning and growth. They don't come obviously without challenges as well, but there's some great resources that I just want to sort of briefly reference here if you're interested. Another interesting farm to school approach to food stewardship is working with local food aggregators, and increasingly across our province, we're seeing the development of food hubs that are being built with more of a social purpose in mind than simply like a for-profit approach. Food hubs are aggregators and distributors of food. They can also be centers where there's a lot of food processing infrastructure, support for local businesses to get started in sort of sustainable food systems. The Ministry of Agriculture has been supporting a lot of development around food hubs in our province over the last sort of almost 10 years now. And so there is an increasing interest and an increasing infrastructure that exists in our province around these kinds of local food aggregators that are supporting the aggregation and distribution and processing of local foods in your region. So it's good to know about these things and to look into them. Then obviously we can make direct connection with farms, ranches, and fishers. And there are a lot of really great producers in every region of BC. Some farmers will aggregate under cooperative models. So we've been working a lot with the Island Vegetable Producers Co-op. And so they have a number of farms that sort of aggregate their food and then distribute out. And for us, it's been really great because we can get a little bit more assured sourcing for things because there's multiple farms who are providing. If you're just working with one farm, sometimes you're it's a bit harder to count on week by week what you're going to get. So those kinds of relationships are often helpful for institutional food program development, but getting to know the landscape in your local region and understanding the opportunities there are, essential to taking a farm to school approach. Next slide. The next kind of fun thing to talk through is procurement. So you get the food is stewarded somewhere, and then you have to get it. And I want to just sort of think through like what are your goals? And if you're taking a farm to school approach, your goals are more than just getting food and getting it into bellies. We're trying to get food in season and expose students to seasonal flavors and to support a local food system, to build school and community connectedness. So the next slide, Marcus. With a quick, easy approach to food to schools, the knee-jerk reaction I think a lot of us take in schools is like, whoa, we got all this money, we better find a caterer who can get food into the schools. And a for-profit catering company often is motivated first by profit, and so they're looking for one supplier who can provide all of their needs, and that one supplier is usually drawing from a very in sort of industrial agriculture system. They're not as able to incorporate diverse local farms and be nimble and be able to be integrating seasonal flavors. You're going to get a quick, easy food to school, which can be really great. I definitely see the value in doing that kind of approach, but you do lose quite a bit, and especially a farm to school kind of approach wouldn't sort of take that path. What we're trying to take is to the development of more central, nimble kitchens. So I've got a picture of our head chef, Ali Ryan, here on the next slide, with her kind eyes. She's such an avid supporter of trying to get food locally. And so she has, over 2 decades of experience, built a lot of sourcing relationships, and she has the knowledge of how to efficiently make a lot of food, but integrate as much as possible local food into the stream. And so we're trying to build a nimble central kitchen that she leads in our project. So we've got this great person, we've got a big kitchen, and we're trying to be able to be sort of responsive to the flavors and seasons of our region. The other thing to think about with procurement is that they're probably in any, like even a medium-sized school district in our province, we're going to have diverse schools and diverse needs across the school district. And so we can think, and we're thinking about this in Souk, we have 3 high schools that have culinary arts programs with big commercial kitchens. So how can we be procuring their needs locally and supporting them in making direct connections within the region? How can we support the middle schools to be doing interesting things with food? And we've got our central kitchen that's bringing food mostly to elementary schools. So trying to understand, I guess, the diverse school needs, the landscape of your district, and how you can procure foods to kind of meet different needs. It is work, of course, to try to sort all of that out, but it has a lot of potential spin-off value, which hopefully I'll talk about coming up. Another thing to consider with the development of school food programs is just engaging students in them. I think, the farm to school approach, this is central, as I showed before. There's some exciting things that are happening in terms of engaging students in cooking. So one thing that we can think about is having a commissary kitchen. So it's a kitchen not at a school that's able to do some production of food and then have the students involved in kind of finishing that food. So you're not relying on the students to do everything, but you're engaging them in the process. So they're feeling a little bit more involved and learning skills and developing relationships with the food. The classic example that I've heard a lot of recently is that you have your commissary kitchen make up the muffin batter, and it's a pain in the butt for Ali, our chef, to be standing there and individually portioning every muffin into a tray. Let's pass that on to the students. They can do that just as well as Ali can, taking a scoop, putting it in a muffin tin and doing 200 muffins. So there's ways in which we can design systems to actually be more efficient using student sort of, I don't want to say student labor, but like student energy, and engaging them in the process so that they're feeling a little bit more bought into what we're doing. That's one kind of fun approach. Then there's also these approaches of actually doing all the cooking in the school. And we have in high schools some brilliant culinary arts teaching kitchens across the province. And I'm fortunate to know some amazing chefs who do such cool stuff, cooking from scratch in high schools and feeding hundreds of students a day. But there's also the lunch lab model in Vancouver is one that I absolutely adore, where we have a prep teacher who's built a whole food program with a chef where they create meals every day and they feed 150 to 200 students and staff every single day, and the food is largely made by students in an elementary school with a chef. Bringing chefs into schools can actually be really efficient, and making food with students in schools like is cheaper. And I can say that like from some evidence, like the culinary arts programs in the Sault School District are able to produce meals that are amazing for $3 to $4 a meal, whereas we, with all of our need for shipping and distribution, and having to pay all of our chefs instead of having them be chef instructors, we're charging about, it costs us about $7 a meal. So the price per meal, if you're cooking with students, can actually be cheaper too. So there's a financial aspect to that. The final thing around cooking and engaging students that there's been a lot of success with in our province is the development of salad bar programs. And there's some really great examples of salad bars that have sprouted up in elementary, middle, and secondary schools in our province. Farm to School BC has some great resources on developing school salad bars, and Farm to Cafeteria Canada as well has developed some really good resources which are available through the Farm to School BC website. So this can be another tactic for engaging students in school meal program development and getting local flavors into the schools. Another aspect of school food program development, is the distribution piece. So moving food around. And go to the next slide here. One thing that we agonize over a lot is food safety. So food safety is a really big deal, of course, and you have to have a really solid plan. So maintaining a cold chain or a hot chain from point of kitchen all the way to the belly is something that I've been really thinking a lot about. And what happens, I've seen with for-profit caterers who come into schools, is that they have a driver who drops the food in the front door and disappears. And there's not really any engagement at the school end about what happens to the food after it enters the door of the school. And I've actually carried food in to elementary schools and walked past carts that have chicken salad sandwiches sitting on them in the front of the school that will sit there for an hour just out in the hall. And that is not really very food safe to have chicken salad sandwiches sitting out in the hall for that length of time, hours before they're supposed to be served. So we really need to think about that cold chain, that maintenance of the food safety chain all the way to the student belly. And that involves engaging your schools in having the skills to do that. And so something that I'm really interested in is developing the skills and relationships with all of the schools we work with and training up our food handling staff. We've been advocating to have at least an hour of staff time to support food service in the schools that we're working with, and we've got that for next year. It's going to be so important to food safety. The other thing is that we started in that sort of development phase. One of our first calls was to the food safety inspector, and Ali, our chef, has decades of relationships with these guys. We called them, they came in and did a very detailed inspection of our kitchen. We have a 30-page food safety plan with all kinds of charts and forms for schools and our kitchen staff to be filling out. And we got it all approved, and we developed it in concert with the food inspectors. And then we got all of our kitchens in the schools where the food was coming into inspected and approved. And we've developed a really good relationship with the people who do the food safety inspections. We've told them about what we're doing. It's not hard to sell people on the idea of feeding kids. Everybody wants to help you. They're all very nice people. We don't have to be afraid of food safety inspectors, but we have to be aware of it, and we have to work collaboratively. Don't fear the food safety inspectors. Empower them to be a part of your team and listen to them and build programs that make them excited about what you're doing. If they're not excited about what you're doing, you shouldn't be excited about what you're doing. They're important. They have good knowledge to share. So yeah, food safety is a part of distribution, I think, a really important consideration. The other thing I'll say from sort of a farm to school approach is that with having a van moving around delivering food to schools, we've seen opportunities to do more. Let's fill that van with food. And we've got our food rescue sort of connection in our project. So 2 days a week, we fill the van with food from food rescue, and we set up these family food markets. So this is a picture from one of the family food markets at one of our elementary schools. And this is just a little add-on that we've been able to throw in with what we're doing. We provide about $1,500 worth of food 2 days a week for families to come and just access for free at the schools. So it's just helping out with groceries. We've got vehicles moving around. There is a lot of food in our community that needs to get out to people who are hungry or who can benefit from accessing it. Let's make that happen. And so we've really tried to understand, like I said, with the analysis phase, understanding the landscape and trying to make sure that we're filling our van with food and getting it out to our community. So there is opportunities to do that kind of thing once you got vans moving around. Central, I think, to the farm to school approach to developing a school food program is this eating together. There's a lot to be said here, and I don't have that much time, but one thing that a lot of research, and Jennifer Black at UBC and her colleagues have shown, is that having a caring food service person is essential to the student experience of a school meal program. So we'll go to the next slide here, Marcus. The food service lady or man or person that provides food at the school is a really important person to a school food program. Their compassionate, kind, smiling face is the students' interaction with that food, and having them sort of supportive and on board. And I think we're also interested in providing them with some more training and so that they can understand interesting concepts like food neutrality and just like best approaches to encouraging students to eat well. We want to have good, caring staff serving the food. And then next, eating together inspires this culture of care and connection amongst everybody in a school, students to students, staff to staff, students to staff. Everybody should be able to come together and eat together in a space of connection and care. You all know what it's like to sit around a table of good food with people. It's one of the most important ceremonies in our lives. And when we don't do that in schools, when we have a buzzer enforced lunchtime that gives you a very limited amount of time to eat as quickly as you can, what we learn is different. So go to the next slide, Marcus. No matter what we're doing and how we're serving food or running meal times at schools, students are learning a lot about food. And so when we're treating food as like a get it in your belly to provide energy for you to keep learning for the rest of your day, do it as quickly as you can with as little staff supervision and support as possible, that is teaching students things about the value of food in our world. And I think we need to change the way that we eat at schools, to be frank, to make it more connected, to make a space for us to share good food around the table. And there's so much to be learned there. And it's important, deep learning. So we'll go to the next slide. In addition, talking about learning, when we're building school food programs, there's so much opportunity to be extending further with food literacy connections and beyond just food literacy with learning connections. So gardens and composts are one place in which a lot of learning can happen. School gardens can be really powerful spaces of learning and engagement. They provide a space for students to be connecting hands-on with their food system in real lived experience ways. The school garden is not necessarily where you're going to get your food to feed students in your meal program, but it's a really important part of your meal program, even if it's not producing any food. I think school gardens have so much to share with us and to teach. If we sort of slow down a little bit and listen. There's also lots of learning opportunities in kitchens and community. We'll go to the next slide here, Marcus. Getting out into the world and connecting with local farmers. This is a slide from a summer work experience program I run in the Souk School District at the Machosen Farm, a student working with one of the farm apprentices in the field. Food provides all kinds of connections. This is an obvious one, but there's many, many others in which we can open the doors of the school community or of the school and create connections with community. Whether it's bringing parent volunteers in to support cleaning up after meals or developing relationships with local organizations. There's so many opportunities to be extending further, to be doing food literacy. And then obviously in the classroom, there's a lot of hard curriculum connections that can be made across every subject. You can learn all kinds of things with food, be it in gardens, in kitchens, at a dinner table, just talking about food. There is really an infinite amount of engagement and connection that can be made to the classroom. And if we're thinking about school food programs from this holistic lens, a lot more is possible. Go to the next slide here, Marcus. So the last kind of thought for me, like, how do we start? I think I've been really trying to wrap my head around this thing for a long, long time. And so I'm in a place where I'm finally starting to feel like some congealing of ideas around the capacity to build a school food program. I feel so grateful to be in this place where we are now, where we're doing stuff. But it takes time, and doing that process of analysis, design, and development is really, I think, really important. And I want to encourage school districts who are here to use some of your funds to invest in that time. If we just rush into trying to get food into bellies really quickly, that may have more quantifiable results in the first year. But if we look 10 years into the future, we're going to have something in 10 years that is nowhere near as beautiful as what we could build if we just sort of slow down a little bit and do some deeper thinking about how we want to build this thing. And we build systems slowly. And for us, with what we've done, we'll go to the next slide, Marcus, with our Setting the Table pilot, we were lucky to have a school district who was interested in working with us to design something that was going to have legs and become sustainable over the long run. And they've been very, I would say, innovative in what in what they've done with us. And they have, an administrator in the school board office, a principal of Safe and Healthy Schools, who's been our primary point person, kind of leading our work. The associates and superintendent in the district are really on board and very happy with the tact that our work has taken. We have administrators in all of our schools that we're working with that are very much supportive and wanting to be a part of the learning journey with us. And then we have people in the schools who are serving food who are also there. And we're looking at building the relationships within the district to have the team. We want the team to be wanting this. They want to be working with us. We're not trying to jam anything down anybody's throats. And we're also really trying to be aware that the schools are already overburdened with all kinds of different responsibilities. And so we need to be trying to create support for them so that they're not feeling like this is just being dropped on them. And I see that happen a lot, where we have like a catering kind of idea that's let's provide 200 meals to this school without really thinking through, well, how are those 200 meals going to be received, like refrigerated, served, cleaned up? Who's going to do that? How are all those systems going to be built? We need to take our time to figure those questions out. And it's a complex landscape, schools. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution, I don't think. Every school district is going to have different needs in different schools. So we need to go slow. We need to allocate funds to support the work. Having good people in positions to do the work is also key. Human resources, we feel and continue to feel as though we've been incredibly lucky with getting good people involved in what we're doing, and good people hopefully show up for you too. I think that may be my last slide. I'm curious, I can't see what's next.
It is, Matthew. Yep.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marcus. So I think we're going to have some time for questions. I'd be certainly excited to hear if people have questions, but pass it back to Marcus.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for such a thoughtful and very inspiring presentation. Yesterday, we went through this presentation just to practice, and I was so inspired hearing Matthew kind of talk, even though it was a quick version. And it's amazing to hear him present again today and feel like even more inspired the second time hearing it. It's really exciting to me on a personal level. I've got a little peanut that's going into kindergarten next year in his in SD62, the Soup School District, and I feel like just such a good team, and it's under such good hands that is going to be bringing this meal program to the table. So, yeah, thank you again, Matthew. And now I will pass it over to the attendees. Does anyone have any questions on either of the presentations from Sam or Matthew? just go down to the bottom. You can see with reactions if you're not comfortable with Zoom, and you can do the raise hand. And then after you've asked the question, you can go to the same spot, the lower hand. So I see a question from Ben.
Hi, this is Ben from Nanaimo, and I'm a farmer at Woodlands School. And I was just wondering, Matthew, I really appreciate the presentation, really inspiring. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on perhaps some of the values-based and philosophical side of things in regards to two things that you briefly mentioned. One is student labor. You said you don't want to say it, but that's also a good word for it in some ways. We know a value is in the experiential learning. Absolutely. I'm just curious your thoughts, further thoughts on that, because I think it's a difficult topic to talk about, but it's valuable to me because I'm relying on student labor to some extent in the project that's being proposed with Woodlands School here in Nanaimo. So that's one topic. And then also I just wanted to get your thoughts on the values as well that are expressed when, like I understand absolutely food waste is a massive problem. And yes, absolutely food banks, food recovery programs are vital. I'm also curious as a farmer, how we can kind of meet in the middle in a way that supports young farmers to make a livelihood while also doing food recovery programs. And how do those two kind of different worldviews or different approaches to food procurement, how do those intertwine in the work that you do?
Yeah, good questions. The student labor piece is an interesting one, and as a garden coordinator in high school, like large high school gardens, I definitely, like, I think just like you, kind of trouble this quite a bit. And I think you never want to just have like free labor and make students feel as though they're just laboring. I think it needs to be sort of as much as we can, creating space for students to be working, but having that be a space of at least reflection, and framing it for them. What I often do when I'm working in school gardens, and I think the same could be true in kitchens, is I say, this is a really diverse, interesting space, and you're going to be asked to do some basic tasks in the garden today. But the more you pay attention, the more you express curiosity in this space and really pay attention, the more you're going to learn. And I really encourage you to try to connect what you're learning in the school, in your classroom, to the lived experience of doing this in the garden or in the kitchen, and let them know. I do this with high school students. You could have to frame it maybe differently with younger kids, but that's what true learning is, when you can connect some concept to a real world situation. And I think we've enculturated students to think that learning happens in a classroom where it's like judged by tests or something, like, and that's actually just not what learning actually is. Learning is when you're able to take a concept and apply it in a real world setting. And I think the more we can provide real world settings for students, the better. So as an educator, yes, it is sometimes a bit challenging to set it up for students in a way that they understand that they're not just laboring, and that we're not just kind of like cracking the whip. And I have gotten better at it, as I still get students say like, oh, our child labor, but I used to get that a lot more than I do now. You get students feeling like the why behind what they're doing. I think is really important, and that's a sort of a pedagogical approach to really leading with the why, and then the students, I think, become a little bit more bought in and willing to do the work. For what it's worth. And then the other question about food rescue and supporting farmer livelihoods, I think they are, for us, really intertwined. With our pilot program, 200 Meals a Day, we've been incorporating 44% of what we're doing is from rescued food that comes through the Mustard Seeds warehouse. That gives us the 56% that we now need to buy. We can spend more on the food, and so we can spend more to support local growers. And we know that it costs more to grow food in a good way, and we want to pay that extra, but we also want to be able to appease the school district who's paying us to do the work, and make sure that the price we're quoting them isn't astronomical and that it's competitive. So the food rescue allows us to do that. We can spend more and buy more local stuff because we are getting a bunch of stuff for free. So it's kind of like using the waste of the industrial food system to our benefit to support local growers. The other thing we're exploring with local growers around waste especially is that local farmers have waste on field too, and a local organization does farm gleaning, and we've been getting a lot of gleaned stuff off of farms, so that's food that would otherwise go to waste on farm, and we can process it and turn it into really great food. But we've been talking about, like, can we actually create a market for farmers' seconds so that farmers don't have to see that go to waste or give it away? They can actually give it to us and we'll pay for it, but pay a slightly cheaper rate so it's affordable for us. And then when they have a field of beets that needs to get tilled, we can have volunteers come out, harvest all those beets, and actually pay the farmer for them. And that's another kind of like food waste to support local growers kind of piece that we're trying to develop. There's lots more to talk about there, but maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Ben. Great question. Thank you, Matthew. I'll
Thank
pass it over
you.
to Ted.
Hi, Matthew. A quick question. So you mentioned 200 meals over 8 schools. So obviously there are way more students than the 200 meals that you're serving.
Yeah.
I'm just really curious because one of the things that we're looking at in our school district and a value that's really important to us is sort of that non-stigmatizing approach to making sure that people have access, but that there's no stigma attached to it. So I'm just curious what you've learned, or as you've gone to a bigger model, how do you approach that, or how is that dealt with in a good way?
Oh, it's such a good question. I really appreciate you asking it. It's really important to us too, and something that we really kind of it feels really disconnected from our values as a group to be doing what we're doing, because we are providing the food specifically to targeted individuals, because the school district only has so much money and they want to see their money going specifically to feeding vulnerable students. So with the 200, it is a targeted program where we're specifically trying to feed the most vulnerable students in the school. And each school kind of determines how to do that in different ways. We have been working very hard with our schools to try to ensure that the ways in which the food is offered are offered in as non-stigmatizing a way as possible. And that is trying to get into all of how that's worked out is probably too much for right now. It's case by case. Every single school does it a little bit differently. There are constraints of the building, there are constraints of the staffing, there are constraints of the sort of culture of the school, and that all are considered and to try to figure out how to provide the food in as good a way as possible. But the reality is that if you're providing a targeted program that's only serving specific students, it is impossible to completely remove the stigma from it, in my view. We have to be moving towards more universally accessible programs that make the food available to everyone. And the other reality is that it's not just the economically disadvantaged families that need this support. Across the socioeconomic spectrum, there is need at every level of society, especially within youth, for good food. And so why are we only giving it to one group? So we're looking at trying to pilot universal programs in some of our schools next year and developing a sliding scale pay what you can model. So at the beginning of the school year, notice will go out through the administrator of this school. We're running this new program. Would you like to sign your student up for a lunch? And then if they do, we're going to develop a portal, like a URL, and they can do it through an online system to register their students and pay what you can. $0 to say $7 is how much it costs us to produce the meal. So you can pay $0 to $7, and then there'll also be an option. Do you want to buy a meal for another student at your kid's school? You can do that too if you're financially well off and able to do that. So that's the future for us. The reality is that it's complicated to develop a system, and we can't go from 0 to 12,000 students overnight. There are all kinds of interesting logistical challenges that we are learning about, and so we're taking a phased approach where we have a goal of making everything universally accessible to everyone, and we're also being realistic that we can only do so much, and we're doing as best we can, and we want to get there, and we're working towards it step by step. I guess that's the approach we're taking.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Thanks for the question. And Matthew, thanks for the answer. we have any other questions for our presenters? I believe, hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, Hina?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Marcus. So I don't know if I'll be able to get an answer to this question, but I'll just share what I'm looking at. So I work with Surrey School District. We are a very big district, more than 100 schools. I work at an inner city school where most of the population is coming from vulnerable families, and food is provided at school. We have a very successful breakfast program where we have a small kitchen and the breakfast is cooked in the kitchen, and a lot of kids come to have breakfast, which is fantastic, which is good. We also have the lunch program, but the meals come from outside in the morning, so they are kept in cold boxes. The food is kept cold because of safety reasons and everything, but a lot of kids who take the food, they don't eat it, they throw it in the garbage, because it's like, how do you eat a cold cheese pizza slice? Like, I can't eat it. So kids are hungry, they're getting the food, but that food they're dumping in the garbage because they just don't like it, and then they're coming to our room to get some snack like a granola bar or Rice Krispie, and they're ending up eating not very healthy meals. So if I would like to propose, so I'm a part of a committee at my school, Healthy Schools Committee. So if I want to get started with this, like Matthew shared, it's a very big project. It looks like there are so many things. So how do we get started? What do we do about it? Like, who do I contact and get the ball rolling?
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure who to contact to get the ball rolling on that. It sounds like understanding who's serving that food, like who is the caterer or the company or whomever is actually making those meals. It'd obviously be important if you want to make change to what they're providing to make it more palatable to students. You need them on board. So try to
Okay.
contact them. I'd suspect the administrator in your school, like the principal, if it's not you, would be a good person to talk to about it. And then you can think through it in different ways. Like there's the food itself that definitely defines in some way whether or not students are going to like it or not. But there's also the ways in which it's shared and the spaces in which it's eaten that can also define like how likely students are to eat that food. And so there's different levers of change that you can pull to try to encourage students to actually accept the food that is being provided. I think one thing that the evidence suggests is that it really providing students with some voice in the determination of what they're getting can be very helpful for encouraging them to participate. And so we've been trying to get feedback throughout and developing mechanisms to support student input and feedback with elementary age students, often really simple questions. What do you like? What don't you like? Even just like a box of like draw what you would like to see, or and getting feedback in that way with older students. And there are some pretty good templates that different organizations have to get input and feedback from students directly. I think that could be a neat thing to try.
Okay.
But I wouldn't go too far down that rabbit hole unless you've contacted the person who's making the food, because you don't want to go and do all this work to get student feedback and then go to them and be like, no, sorry, we're not going to do anything different. Like, this is the way we do it. This is what works for us. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that question. I've also I'm going to put here down in the chat. We have a community animator that actually supports the Surrey School District, Angelina, and you should look to reach out to her. Her contact's right there. She might be able to offer a little bit of support. I see Luke. I'll pass it over to Luke.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much for such a great presentation. Matthew, I was just wondering if you could, or if you had any examples of schools that had really transformed that environment in terms of the consumption of food and enjoying the food. And you pointed to the existing model of sort of the bell-driven race to eat your food either before or after going to play. And I just wondered what you'd seen in terms of some successes where that culture had shifted a bit.
Yeah, I honestly, I sadly can't point to a lot of school examples where it's like Lord Roberts Elementary, where they run the lunch lab program, I think is one shining beacon for me in terms of like massive change in the way they've totally reorganized how food is served in that school. But some of the like sort of literature suggests that there's some simple things that can be done that I've seen done in some schools. Like one thing is play before you eat is a kind of a big concept where you just getting the kids to go outside and run around and play first, so that they're not eating quickly and with the excitement to get out at recess and play, where they get that energy out and then they come back to the mealtime and they're hungrier and calmer and able to share food in a less manic way, perhaps. So that's a simple step. And another step from sort of the literature evidence, and most of this comes from like not schools around where I live, so I don't really know that, but the evidence is that when teachers are given instructional time to eat with their students is another, it's not small, it's a change in the way that the time is administered in a school district. That can be a big shift in terms of creating the mealtime as a little bit more of an intentional space. I don't know, Sam, if you know some more like concrete examples. Those are kind of higher level, like.
Yeah, I would probably have to do some thinking about concrete examples of schools that have changed in the last little bit, but there are some schools I know who have extended the amount of time students have to eat lunch. So yeah, offering more time, a common eating area. We are in the process of developing some resources in collaboration with the Ministry of Health right now that are going to be up on, hopefully linked to the Ministry of Education website and shared out with all of you, that have some specific examples of how to create healthy school food environments. So that should be coming before the next school year, that have some specific examples and promising practices in there too.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Luke. Great question. I see that Ellen has put in a little link there to a Play First Lunch toolkit worth checking out. Next on the question is Shauna. Over to you.
Hi there. Thanks for the presentations. They were really great. My question is about how is everyone able to build such a large volunteer basis? I find that here we have the same volunteers and they're starting to get tired and the numbers are going down, especially since COVID. Is there something other than, I mean, we reach out to PAC, of course, but is there other ways that you could suggest?
It's a really good question. I think one thing that I have often reflected on living where I live is that we have an exceptional volunteer spirit in this region. I've worked in the Lower Mainland as well, and it's not nearly as easy to find volunteers. There's just like a real, I think with something that region to region you can be blessed with or not. One thing that has worked for us is to connect with other organizations that are doing similar work. So we have the Food Share Network in our region, which has over 60 organizations that do food-related community work in our region. So when we were looking for volunteers, we reached out to those organizations with a call, and a lot of those organizations already had volunteer bases. So you can kind of draw upon those networks and building relationships with other organizations in your region. Who are the organizations that are providing volunteer opportunities? And often organizations can't provide enough volunteer work for volunteers to be satiated, like they want to do something every week or they want to do something every month, and often organizations, it'll be like seasonal work, or which just won't be as regular as volunteers would like. So having diverse opportunities to be volunteering in the same type of area can be beneficial for all parties involved. And I've been trying to pump that up with our collaborators. Like when we work together, we're not stealing volunteers from you. We're helping you keep long-term volunteers, because you don't have people who come volunteer for being like, I want to do something where I can be more committed and invested. If we all support volunteers to be committed and invested in this thing, then we all win. So that's the approach that I've taken.
I don't want to put Serena on the spot, but I know Serena's here, and I know she's had experiences, maybe similar experiences around volunteerism. Serena, are you around, and would you be willing to share as well?
Sure. Our experience with volunteers, I think what you have going for you is feeding children is extremely rewarding. So in terms of a volunteer experience, you know, you're not getting volunteers to do something that they don't want to do and aren't going to feel really good about themselves at the end of the day. So we most of our volunteers are seniors who are retired, and in our community we have lots of kind of grandmas who don't live near their grandkids, and so they are just like longing for children. So that's sort of who we target in our volunteer pool. And the volunteers we've had, like I've had the same volunteers for 3 years since we started our programs. And they all love it. And, you know, I think the big thing for us is once we have a volunteer, we really want to keep them, because then, you know, it does take resources to train them. And so we really practice a lot of gratitude with our volunteers, and we always have like thank you lunches at the end of the school year. And, you know, we're just always sort of doing these public shout outs to our volunteers because they are critical to school food programs.
Thank you.
May I say one more thing about volunteers, which is this exceptional example from Nourish which is an organization that feeds students in SD 79, I believe, in Cowichan Valley. And it's 2 staff and the rest, I don't even know how many, it must be dozens and dozens of volunteers who feed 1,200 students a day across the district. If I'm getting the numbers correct, it's an astronomical amount of food that they prepare. And what FATMA has done with Nourish Cowichan is really create the community around this program. So the volunteers are involved in decision making. She prepares a hearty meal for volunteers every day. She's got this kind of central kitchen that has a kitchen table set up, so it almost feels like, you know, you're going into someone's home and you can sit down and have a cup of tea and have a meal, and then you go and you do your volunteering shift, and then you come back and you chat with people. So it's really, she's created this beautiful community space and community around this program, and I think it's been really helpful for that for their program.
Thanks for that question, Shauna, Serena, and Sam for jumping in there. I see we have time for one last question, and I see Sonia, our Kamloops regional animator's hand up, so I'll pass it over to you, and
Thanks,
then we'll move into our wrap up. Thank you.
Thanks. I think this question is geared towards Sam or Sue-Ann. I recognize that First Nation schools are federally funded, but I am curious, like with this big announcement of funding, if there is any way for that funding to be pivoted towards supporting First Nation schools, or if there was any funding announcement that came out with conjunction, just so that programming is recognized too.
Sue-Ann, feel free to jump in here, but no, there's no funding announcement for funding towards First Nations schools for meal programs. This Feeding Futures funding, as far as has been announced so far, is for the 60 public school districts. And First Nation schools are primarily funded through the federal government. And so our advocacy continues to federal government to match the funding and make sure that there's dedicated funding for First Nations Métis and Inuit school communities across the country. That said, I think some schools and school districts are supporting their local First Nation schools. I know Seamus mentioned something this morning about how a school district is working to support a local First Nation school nearby. So there's ways to kind of collaborate and support each other, but right now there's no dedicated funding for First Nations school food programs in BC.
Yeah, I'll just mirror what Sam said. Sorry, just that because it's kind of convoluted as well. There's like the First Nation schools that are part of the school districts. There's certified independent First Nation schools, and then there's also First Nation community schools. And so yeah, you'll get that small percentage that are within the school districts that are being funded. But other than that, it's just we just need more universality of it all.
Thanks,
Thank
Joanne.
you.
Thanks, Sonia, for a great question. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up the final aspects of the presentation now, as we're just a few minutes out from being all wrapped up. I want to give a big thanks for presenters today for joining us, and more importantly, the tireless work that they do day in and day out to support the development of a healthy landscape in schools across the province. So big thank you to both of them. Their contacts are here again. Just some next steps. So we will look to review the polls and content that you shared via the chat box, with the hopes to be able to host future sessions based on this feedback, or maybe other ways of supporting. So please do reach out. And as we mentioned earlier, the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. If you just go into YouTube, Farm to School BC, it'll pop up. There's all kinds of other videos on there as well. Might take us a day or two to get that up, but it will be coming, and it's something you can share around. And also feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, or if you need any clarifications on anything that went on today or beyond. And additionally, you can follow us at our social media. You could sign up for our newsletter and visit our website for any additional information there as well. So we thank you, everyone. I know this is for those of you working at the school district or working to support. This is going to be a very busy time. I think that it's also a very inspiring time. We're really making change that is going to impact people's lives, these children's lives, for years to come. And there's plenty of research out there that indicates the effects of kids eating healthy, nutritious meals together at schools. And we're right on that kind of doorstep beginning that. It's exciting to see. I looked, and I think there was about 75 people who came today, and when I looked yesterday, we had 84 registered, and that's amazing. I rarely see that amount show up when they register, so it's showing that there's a lot of interest and passion behind this work. And so we do hope to stay connected, and that this is just the first in many chances for us to come together and have discussions and share our successes and challenges in the development of these meal programs. So again, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Sam. Thanks to all of you who have joined, all the wonderful questions. I hope you have a lovely day, and hope to see you soon.